I keep seeing comments asking me to follow up on the driver issues I was reporting on in the video you see behind me, where I was testing out Resident Evil Requiem and noticed there was all sorts of problems with the drivers and performance in that game, but also there were other issues with the drivers as well, affecting overclocks, and there were a series of other issues that had hot fixes. It was absolutely a mess. So in this video, I'll give you a little background context on that. I will test out Resident Evil Requiem on the latest drivers, but also a little bit of a spoiler that there does seem to also already be a hot fix out for the latest driver, although this is for an issue that is seeming to be in Arknight's Enfield. So anyway, there's that. So, again, a little bit of a backstory. So, when Resident Evil Requiem launched, there was a, day one driver support originally ready for that game, but it was instantly pulled back because there was fan control issues noted with that driver. So when the game launched, it didn't actually have the day one driver when it was being tested out. And some users were noticing that if you went back to an extremely old driver, like 576.88, you would see significantly increased performance. And I tested it out on a couple of GPUs, the 5090 and the 4070 Ti Super, to get something from the 40 series, something from the 50 series, and other users, other videos, comments, etc. tested out on other GPUs and also noticed the same things. I then, in this video, also followed up with a driver that was supposed to actually bring the Resident Evil Requiem support. That was 595.71, and while it had slightly improved things compared to the driver that was available at release, it wasn't as good as the driver that had been available, months prior, when you were comparing against that. Now, however, that version of the driver had some significant issues with voltages when overclocking. There was, articles about it. The Nvidia's GPU driver totally wrecked user overclocks, and there was a hot fix released for that, which was then incorporated into some follow-up drivers. So fully released drivers at this point have repaired the overclocking issues. You can control voltages back to how they used to be. However, like I said, the current driver does still have issues. There is a hot fix available, and this one is regarding specifically stuttering issues in Arknight's Enfield. It's unclear if there's any other issues there, and we would expect that this hotfix be rolled into the next full release driver, which we would expect fairly soon, since we do have promised the final release of DLSS multi-frame gen with the dynamic mode and 6x frame gen promised at the end of March, which would just be in less than a week now. So we would be expecting yet another driver update coming there. But what I'm testing out in this video, as we'll see here, once again on the 4070 Ti Super, followed by the 5090 to get a couple different GPU generations in there. What I'm testing out here is the latest driver that is currently available, but without the hotfix. So this is on the far right, driver 595.97. Also, I have reordered my footage to be in the how oldest to newest driver version. So on the far left here, what we're seeing is the old drivers that were ancient even at the time of Resident Evil Requiem's release, but people noticed they were getting the best performance on that. When we look at relative performance, I'm going to set that as the 100% baseline. Here we see driver 591.86, which was the one that was actually available when the game launched because the actual game support specific day one driver had been pulled due to the fan control issues. And then the next one over, we see 595.71, which was the official release that added in Resident Evil Requiem support, but didn't actually seem to get performance up to on par with the oldest driver versions I had compared with. And on the far right, we have what is, as of today, the full latest release driver. When you just go into your Nvidia app and download the latest driver, this is 595.97. And what we're seeing here on the 4070 Ti Super at 1440p max settings, which includes path tracing, but also DLSS performance, and I'll make myself tiny and out of the way now, we can see that in this intro city scene, which is what this is testing, that the newest driver is now actually slightly ahead of the ancient drivers, 576.88, we're seeing 72 FPS versus 70. It's a 3% improvement. So basically on par with those drivers, but significantly better than the regressed performance that we had seen on the launch version drivers and the official day one support driver that was out, the one that didn't get pulled. Anyway, so that's what we're seeing here. Now, next I'm testing out the central hall area because I had seen on the previous drivers that this scene actually performed about the same on all of the GPUs. This is still the 1440p max settings with path tracing and DLSS performance on the 4070 Ti Super, and that's what I'm seeing here as well. Apologies that I didn't quite line up the camera angle perfectly on all of these, but basically I'm just testing that performance does seem to be exactly the same, regardless of which driver version we're using, including the newest one. It had already seemed the same in this scene, so my earlier reporting already had mentioned that depending on the scene you're testing, you might not see issues. The next scene that I tested was the intro cinematic, which once again shows about the same performance on all driver versions tested, although technically the newest one, 595.97, does actually show a 2% and 2 FPS performance increase at 116 versus 114, but those aren't the kinds of changes that you'd really notice. Now, before we switch over to the 5090, I do want to pull back to the initial scene where we see the largest differences and highlight the wattage that the card is reporting right here. Because in the oldest driver, we had seen the card pulling close to 270 watts in this scene, whereas on the launch, at launch of the game, the driver was only pulling about 224 watts here. And then on the official game-supported driver, we were up to 236 watts, but still well short of the 270 watts that we were pulling with the oldest driver version. Notice that the newest driver version is right back up to that kind of 270 watt range. So it looks like whatever was holding back the card from reaching its full potential seems to have been sorted out in this driver version. Now, I should also mention that these are old tests that I did compared to a new one done today. So there are additional variables in this testing because the game has had some updated patches and things like that too. So I'm not completely isolating for the driver as the only variable here. I'm basically just testing what the game was like at launch on a few different driver versions and then what the game's like now on the latest driver version. So I will throw that in as a caveat on this isn't entirely scientifically isolating for the variable of game version as well. So the point is, though, that the game does seem to be fixed on the, if you play it right now on the latest driver version, latest game version. We're now switching over to the 5090, where I had also seen regressed performance, and that does also seem to be fixed in this intro scene, and in fact, 5% improvement over the oldest driver, which previously was the best performance. And I noticed I just set this 100% wrong right here. I'm going to cover that up. It is not 100%. Here, can I put myself in front of that? It's not 100% on this one. Sorry, that's a typo. It was 83 FPS versus 87. 83 is not 100% of 87, believe it or not. But anyway, we are on the best performance version now. Looks like the typo is corrected in this scene. I type all those in by hand, so sorry, apologies for the mistake. Now, this scene, I had seen a regression on the original version of the game drivers, but then that had already been corrected in the official driver, launch for the game with 595.71. And here we're seeing, again, slight improvement by 1 more frame per second, although my camera angle isn't perfectly synced up. So perhaps that 1% improvement is just a camera angle difference. Anyway, the point is everything seems to be fixed. And again, the third scene that I tested, this is on the 5090 again. By the way, the 5090 is being tested at 4K max settings with path tracing DLSS performance. Here we are seeing that I have some typos again. I apologize, guys. Okay, I'm just going to scroll to the end scene. I'm going to mention that, I screwed up some of the typos on this. You can see the actual performance numbers here. The middle one is the average. So we're seeing 130, 114, 134, 135. We can see, I think my percentages here were mostly okay, but I seem to have screwed up the actual raw FPS average there, so my apologies. The point is that we can see that the latest version is indeed the best version, and once again, we can see that the power issues seeming to stop the card from drawing the wattage. It's especially accentuated in this intro scene. These seem to have been solved on the 5090 as well, where on the opening scene on the oldest driver version, we were drawing about 531 watts, whereas when the game launched on that driver version, we were seeing 471 watts. And then on the official, Resident Evil Requiem supported driver, we were up to 584.4 watts. And then now on the current driver and game version, we're up to 534 watts. So again, some sort of issue seemed to be holding back GPUs, and I tested both 40 and 50 series in this game, at least in certain scenes when the game launched and on the various driver versions. But the oldest driver version, 576.88, didn't seem to have that hang up. And we do seem to be back on par with that, if not a couple percent ahead, single digits anyway. So if you've been holding off on updating your drivers when playing through Resident Evil Requiem, it does seem to be that the latest game version and drivers do have that sorted out. And like I said, the main known issue with the current driver version does have a hot fix available if you're also playing Arknight's Enfield. Hopefully, we start seeing a little less driver variants and issues on these latest drivers and all that. Seems like it's been a bit of a rough year for Nvidia drivers compared to their typical standards. So hopefully we see things getting a little bit more stable from here on out, not having to worry so much about which driver version you're using when playing the latest, biggest releases of the year. Anyway, hopefully you guys found the video useful and or interesting. You could let me know in the comment section if you're seeing other types of driver issues. No promises on whether or not I'd be able to do a video investigating them, but it couldn't hurt to let me know or share that information with each other. And I hope all of you have an excellent day.